The patriarchy meets healthcare. Here's why I don't trust systems that are built by white men. Patriarchy wants us sick and silent. Welcome back to Stay at Home Feminist. Your soft girl era starts here, along with the fall of the patriarchy. I'm Binx, your favorite feminist with the TikTok addiction. And today we're diving into why healthcare is just another weapon in the patriarchy's arsenal. We're going to unpack everything from the dismissal of women's symptoms to why autoimmune diseases love women, thanks patriarchy, to how to advocate for yourself at the doctor's office. As a woman with ADHD, an autoimmune condition, and who has tried to get pregnant on purpose, I feel uniquely qualified to discuss this. I feel like I've become an expert just from having to navigate the healthcare system myself. What's crazy about this or alarming about this is that I feel like almost every woman I've talked to and women who I know are listening are gonna hear this episode and have their version, their story of when they've been to the doctor's office and not been listened to. I have left doctor's offices in tears because of how much I felt like I was not being taken seriously, which is like the worst thing when you're going to the doctor, because it's like you're there for help. You're there for their expertise, and to just be ignored. And I feel like it happens to everyone, but it happens to women a lot, especially women of color. And we see the way that that shows up in medicine, you know, with the disproportionate maternal mortality rates when it comes to Black women and so many other aspects, unfortunately. So yeah, I think my wildest healthcare experience that made me question the system was I had an undiagnosed autoimmune condition for years and years. I had like crazy pain. I had really, really weird symptoms. And so I went to like a bunch of different types of doctors because like I was having joint pain, like so much pain that it was like debilitating. Like half of my body would just feel like it was like all my joints were on fire. And a doctor dead ass was like, that's just you getting older. I'm like, bitch, what? What do you mean that's just me getting older? Like, no, that's not what aging is supposed to be like. Mind you, I was like 28, 29 at the time. So like, what the fuck? I saw like so many different types of doctors after that. And years later, I like gave up. I gave up and just started like meditating and like it's doing past life regressions and shit. Real talk. Trying to like heal my lineage and my soul contract. And my soul lives, because modern medicine was not fucking doing it for me. And it fucking helped, actually. But I sort of gave up and moved on with life and, you know, just started healing myself my own ways. And then apparently it didn't work very well because I had an ovarian cyst and I went to a naturopathic OBGYN. So like Eastern and Western medicine kind of like combined. And she ran extensive testing and tested my thyroid and found out I had Hashimoto's. And mind you, years earlier when I was on this journey of going to like doctor after doctor, I got my thyroid tested and they did one test and you're supposed to do like 3 tests. So what the fuck? Basically, if you have something going on, advocate for your fucking thyroid to be tested and be like, no, don't just do the one basic test. There's 3 and I don't know the names of it, but you can Google it and Google will be your friend. I think also in America, it's so frustrating because the healthcare system is like so broken here. Like I grew up not in the United States. My parents are American, but because of their jobs, I grew up overseas. And so I've learned to navigate the healthcare system like as an adult. I'm not like used to this healthcare system at all. And it really blows my mind how much Americans think that they are like number one, but like people are going bankrupt if they get diabetes or like get in a car accident or whatever, you know, like it's just insane to me. Ugh, it's so frustrating. So yeah, that whole journey, which I'll get probably more into later, is probably the wildest healthcare experience I've had. And yeah, I left doctor's offices time and time again, feeling very confused and very dismissed and very frustrated. And unfortunately, I don't think I'm unique in that experience. I started to see like acupuncturists and try like other routes of medicine. And I started to feel a lot more heard by Eastern medicine because I feel like they do a whole body approach and like ask a bunch of questions. And that was sort of like the beginning of me finding healing. I still have an autoimmune condition. I still am figuring it out. Like 5 years later, here I am, like really still on this journey, like navigating it. I actually am so painfully bloated right now. I got a procedure done about a week ago, and no one fucking told me that like I might get painfully bloated, which is why I'm wearing this. I almost didn't film today because I felt like such shit. And then I was like, well, we are filming about the patriarchy and healthcare, and I am going through it with my health issues today. So figured I'd just come on here and see how it goes. And maybe this is going to just be a giant waste of time and I'm going to delete it all because I'm going to hate it so much because I just am not feeling good. But maybe I'll show you my bloat in a little bit if I stand up. Because girl, I look like 6 months pregnant. And yeah, I fucking hate the healthcare system here in conclusion. I think there are so many reasons why I think that women's experiences in healthcare differ from men. Not that men can't also be like written off or not paid as much attention to, but I think like when you really, really like shine a light on it, first of all, the majority of testing that has been done for medicines, everything, is like on men. Like men are who they tested on. Same with like seatbelt safety, like not just healthcare, like so many things. And so it doesn't like transfer over to women as much. So that sucks. Second of all, I feel like women's experience with healthcare, it's like a good metaphor for the way women are treated in society. Like women are not taken as seriously. Women's pain is not taken as seriously. Women's complaints aren't taken as seriously. And this happens as much as it does with like sexual assault and those sorts of things as it does with being in the medical industry. Women are seen as weaker, sensitive, hysterical. Oh God, don't get me fucking started on hysterical. And there's this notion that women are somehow the weaker, more sensitive sex, so you shouldn't take them seriously, which even if we were weaker and more sensitive, which I don't think we are, our pain is still fucking valid, first of all. Second of all, like, how the fuck are you going to tell me that I can create life and push it out of my fucking pussy into this world and I'm the weaker fucking sex? Meanwhile, you accidentally like flick a man's balls and he's curled over on the floor in the fetal position. Like, fuck off, okay? So that's a little bit of that. My personal experience navigating the healthcare system really makes me feel like it does reflect like larger issues going on. Like there are systemic issues and it all boils down a lot to patriarchy, white supremacy, these things that we talk about over and over again. And I think that is, I guess, the point of these conversations is like, it is so entrenched in everything we do. And I'm fucking over it. I'm fucking over it. I think that's why it's so important for us to start critically thinking about the healthcare as it relates to the patriarchy and the healthcare being almost like a tool of oppression. Like the healthcare system is supposed to be something that's benefiting us. And I don't want to be like so negative and be like, don't go to your doctor. Like go to your doctor, like find a good one, you know? But I think you really have to like come fucking correct when it comes with navigating the healthcare system in the United States, especially if you are a woman. And again, like not to discourage anybody, but I think it's really important to have this conversation so that you can be an advocate for yourself, so you can know what you're up against. And maybe you'll have an amazing experience and like none of this will be relevant for you. I hope that is the fucking case. But for most of us who it's not, like, yeah, come correct. I think I definitely want to later dive into some like actual like to-dos that I do when I go to the doctor to make sure that I'm like ready to fucking roll as possible. But first, let's get into the meat and potatoes. Like, what are we talking about? We are talking about the dismissal of women's pain and women's symptoms. That's like a real fucking thing that's happening. And I think women's pain is constantly downplayed in healthcare because the patriarchy doesn't believe we know our own bodies. You know, there's this notion, as I said, that the patriarchy upholds that men are smarter than women. Women are the weaker sex. Women are hysterical and dramatic. And the patriarchy pushes these narratives to invalidate women. And that invalidating us is supposed to keep us like in our place and fucking silent. And honestly, it fucking worked on me for a while because I was so like beaten down by the healthcare system that I just like stopped trying to get help. Like, and that makes me so sad that that's like the situation I was in. I think there's a lot of like threads that we can pull out when it comes to like the historical context of the ways that the patriarchy and its twin white supremacy, well, maybe not twin isn't the right word, the way that the patriarchy and its brother in arms, white supremacy, are woven into the healthcare system. But I think the lowest hanging fruit here is thinking about hysteria and the historical context around hysteria and women and the way it still haunts us in medical rooms today. And I think the origins of hysteria and women having that and that being like an actual thing that we could have been diagnosed with, which like dead ass would have been me. It really still impacts women's healthcare today. And I'm joking because I laugh so that I don't cry. But yeah, it's a real fucking thing. I think it shows up in the way that we are dismissed from like chronic pain, which again is something I personally have dealt with, to being told our symptoms are all in our heads, or to being told like the example I just said of being like, well, this is just you aging and getting older. Like, bitch, no, it's fucking not. Like, I think when you look at the way that the healthcare system has interacted with women, like beyond hysteria, which we talked about a little bit in the previous episode, so I don't want to just say all the same things over again. But another sort of thread to pull at here is the way that the patriarchy has medicated women. Like I think housewives in the 60s, a really good example of this. Like they were prescribed so many fucking drugs because they were like unhappy just staying at home and like having fucking Don Draper husbands who were like living their best lives and fucking whoever they wanted and off Madison Avenue. And I know obviously like Betty and Don Draper are like not everybody in the 60s, but I think that show really captured something there. And as my historical reference to the 50s and 60s, but it really captured something in the way in which housewives were very, very depressed and just getting like prescribed Valium and speed and whatever the fuck. Like housewives were literally prescribed speed so that they could like go off and like clean their house as good as possible, which honestly, as someone who's taken Adderall, which is basically just like speed, like I get it. I get it. Life can be more fun when you're on speed. Cleaning is definitely more fun when you're on speed, but don't do that. Don't do that. It's not good for you. And yeah, I think, again, all that to say is there's another example of a woman being like, hey, I have this real thing I'm dealing with. And the healthcare system being like, shut the fuck up and take these drugs instead. You'll be fine. Like your worries, your pain, your discomfort, your feelings are not valid. Here's a fucking pill for that and shut the fuck up. Unfortunately, it's still happening today in different ways. I think the most disturbing part about this is there are like long-term effects for this. And women are walking around with undiagnosed conditions like endometriosis, or heart disease, because it's like low key, like if you're not dying, there's not enough proper diagnosis. And obviously that's not the case for everyone. Again, I don't want this to be like an alarmist thing where you feel like super discouraged by the healthcare system and you're like, feel like, okay, fuck it, I might as well give up and just die now. Like that's not the point I'm trying to make about that awareness. And I think endometriosis is like the fucking perfect way to make this point, which is like endometriosis impacts so many people with uteruses. And the fact that we don't have like a grip on how to get that diagnosed, like there's like a statistic, like you have to try to get diagnosed like 7 times for you to get that diagnosis or something with endometriosis. Doctors thought I had endometriosis and I had this surgery to take out a cyst that was on my ovaries, and took out the cyst and like looked for endometriosis when it was in there and there wasn't any. And so I was like, okay, so then like what's all this pain about? And they were like, well, maybe it is. Maybe we just like didn't see any there. And I was like, okay. And they were like, or you could have this other thing called like endometriosis or something. I'm blanking on what it's called. And I was like, where basically it's like endometriosis in your cervix instead of like growing on the outside of your organs, it's like inside in the cervix. And I was like, cool, well, how do we get that diagnosed? And the doctor deadass was like, you have to get a hysterectomy. And I'm like, oh, so you don't get that diagnosed. And like, if there was fucking a male version of this, like we would have the science. We would have the science, but women's pain isn't paid attention to. So they don't care about shit like endometriosis. Like that's fucking insane to me. That's fucking insane to me. And I see it over and over again. Like, honestly, endometriosis aside, like the fact that we all get our periods and just like vibe, go to fucking work, put our little tampons up our sleeves so we don't offend anybody on the way to the bathroom while we're like bleeding out our fucking insides. I get horrible periods, if you're like not catching my drift, from my like cysts and other problems, almost endometriosis or whatever I got going on. And like, fuck, our pain isn't always taken seriously. And we should have period days, 1 day a month where we can take off. I'm pretty sure Spain does that or someone. Because, yeah, ladies, use your sick days for your period. I used to always use my sick days for my period because like I had them. I had sick days and I didn't feel good. So bye. I think another really good example, speaking of uteruses, is that people with uteruses get IUDs with no pain relief. And like the pain for that is supposed to be like one of the most painful things you could fucking experience. And they're just like, oh yeah, no, you should be good. Like, again, I feel like I'm just like not even trying. I'm just like, as soon as I started thinking about uteruses, I just thought of like 50 different examples where the medical industry is just like, oh yeah, this really painful thing. Like, yeah, you're good. You don't need any pain relief for it. Give me some fucking pain pills. Give me some fucking pain pills for my period, please. And fuck getting an IUD. Oof. You better knock me the fuck out if you get IUD. But, you know, with the way things are going, some of us should consider IUDs because it seems like birth control might be on the chopping block. So I don't want to deter you from getting an IUD. Maybe just like get some pain pills or don't, allegedly. Don't take my advice. Don't do drugs. And I feel like all these examples, again, other than the way in which the patriarchy tries to make our pain and our feelings and our voices and our experiences less valid, under the patriarchy, women are also expected to be okay with not having bodily autonomy. And this like way that it chips making our experiences and our pain and our feelings and our this and that less valid is like the same branch of the patriarchy that expects women to be okay not having bodily autonomy. And I think that is like the root of the root that I'm trying to get at with a lot of this stuff, because it's like the same thing in a different fucking font. And I feel like a lot of men don't fucking realize like the ways in which that is pervasive to us and the ways in which we experience this in like the micro and the macro over and over again. And like the ways in which society is just expecting us to be okay with fucking men who can't find a clit telling us when and how we're supposed to get pregnant. And just for the fucking record, while I'm on my little fucking ranty rant here, there is no such thing as being pro-life. You are not fucking pro-life. That's not fucking for real. You cannot be pro-life and pro-death penalty. You cannot be pro-life and pro everyone should have a fucking gun when guns are the number one thing killing children and teens in the US. You cannot be pro-life when these abortion bans make maternal and infant mortality rates 6 times higher in the states that they are in. You cannot be pro-life when women are dying because of these bans. That's not fucking pro-life. You know what that is? That's fucking pro-forced birth. That is pro-forced birth. And that's all that fucking is. Okay? So let me just set that right there so you know where I fucking stand on that. Okay? If you don't know me and what I'm about, now you fucking do. Anyways, whew. So that's that. And as I was saying, it is all part of the patriarchy's scheme to dismiss women, dismiss them knowing themselves, dismiss them advocating for themselves, and dismiss them having bodily autonomy. And like, fuck no. And if you've felt dismissed, I want to talk about some strategies that have worked to get doctors to take me seriously. Okay, I mentioned this briefly. Number one is that I see Western medicine, like traditional doctors, but I also see Eastern medicine. So that means I am going to acupuncturists, I'm going to naturopathic doctors. Again, like I went to a naturopathic OBGYN. Right now, for some of my hormonal and my Hashimoto's issues, I'm going to a naturopathic endocrinologist. So this is like a board certified doctor, but they are just a naturopath. I think one thing that I've learned is that like surgeons are going to tell you you need surgery. Like naturopaths are going to tell you you need fucking like castor oil. And, you know, like basically what I'm trying to say is like people in their specialty are going to give you advice about that specialty because that's what they're trained to do. And that is just like the system we're working with. It's like not positive or negative, but that is why you should get multiple opinions. And I really encourage you to do that. So seeing multiple different kinds of doctors and getting that information and taking notes, it's so overwhelming when you are seeing multiple doctors or you're seeing doctors about a thing and then like years go by and you don't know where the notes are for that. I have a file on my computer called medical stuff and I just like save every fucking medical document I get in there because it is so hard to keep track of that. I think also, again, like keeping notes of what different doctors say and like finding a way to keep that organized. Each doctor place has like a different portal and the portals they like all got onto the internet at the same time and all made like their own apps. It's basically like how there's like, we used to have like cable and now we have like Netflix, which was like great. But then it's like, okay, well then there's the Peacock channel and the Disney channel and Hulu and this and that. And it's like, well, maybe we should have just had cable, because what are we doing here? We basically have cable now just without commercials. Like, what the heck? So it's basically like the medical industry, I feel like, did that, where they each have their own portal and they don't communicate with each other. And it's fucking stupid and frustrating and whatever. We're not here to solve that today. Fucking RFK Jr. is gonna fucking solve that. That fucking handbag, fucking crocodile handbag of a man is apparently gonna solve this for us, but whatever. But all that to say is, one of the first really good ways to advocate yourself is to keep your stuff organized. Just like never assume anyone's gonna do it for you. Just be on fucking top of everything. Speaking of being organized, lists are great. I find that when I go to the doctor, I am like so overwhelmed. And depending on the doctor, like sometimes I feel like I'm in there and the doctor is just super like clearly in a rush, like late to me and then in a rush and clearly trying to like get to the next appointment because they were late for me. So they're probably late for the next one. And I'm just like, again, like a reformed people pleaser. So for me, it's really hard when I can like tell that someone isn't in a rush, like being like, no, I'm going to like reclaim my time, claim my time a little bit and do that. Fuck them. If they don't know how to time management, that's on them, not on you. You are the patient. You are the customer. This is America. The customer is always fucking right. But second of all, even if they're not in a rush and all of that, I feel like it can be very overwhelming when you're on the spot to like remember all the questions you had. So as I think of questions like throughout the week leading up to my doctor's appointment or weeks or month or whatever, like write it down. I write it down in my notes app and read it while I'm sitting in the waiting room and have it like pulled up and ready. So if I'm in the doctor's office, I like remember the questions. And if they don't naturally bring it up, then I bring it up, you know, because I like have those questions, then it's like I'm less likely to forget it. So those are some of my main ways of advocating that I'd suggest. Okay, another pro tip is that if a doctor says it's probably stress, I really do believe that being stressed contributes to health stuff. Like there's studies about that. Like managing your stress is very important, but I think that's can be a scapegoat. Just again, like doctors being like, you're getting older. This is just what getting older is like. That and them saying it's probably just stress. That's a red flag. Honestly, if your doctor says some shit like that to you and is not offering you any solutions or like any diagnosis of what else it could be other than stress or getting older, like bounce, like red fucking flag, get the fuck out. Or one thing I saw on TikTok that a doctor recommended was if they say something and you don't know what it is, or like their diagnosis isn't helpful, you can ask, what is your differential diagnosis? And apparently that means like, what else do you think it could be? And saying differential diagnosis is like a medical jargon. So they'll be like, ooh, this bitch knows what they're talking about. So yeah, those are some of my tips. I think go-to strategies to get your doctor to listen is just to be prepared to advocate for yourself. Like I think when I first started my journey dealing with different medical professionals, I was like so assuming that these motherfuckers would like be good at their job and like be competent that I wasn't like prepared to be advocating for myself in these ways. And the more you know, and I learned that the hard way a little bit. So yeah, I think just being prepared to advocate yourself is a good one. So we can't really change much about the healthcare system, at least not like in a moment. It's good to highlight what's going on in the healthcare system. I do also feel like there's only so much we can do there. And again, I don't want to be like scaring anyone with the healthcare system incompetencies. And I hate that feeling of like, well, there's like, might as well give up. There's nothing you can do. So like, that's not what we're trying to do here. And I think that is one of the reasons I feel very excited and passionate to talk about autoimmune diseases, because knowledge is power. And I feel like there's so much people don't know about autoimmune conditions. And there's a lot we can do ourselves that don't have to do with the healthcare industry to prevent or to curb autoimmune conditions. So here's a fun stat. 80% of people with autoimmune conditions are women. And stress is one of the big culprits. Remember earlier I was saying like, okay, if they say it's just stress, like fuck them. But also like stress is an important thing. And I think for me, I didn't realize how stressed and burnt out I was because I'm not like the CEO of a 500 Fortune company or like someone who has like 12 kids or like living in extreme poverty or destitution or like these things that I feel like it's only valid to be stressful if you're in like these extreme situations. So I didn't realize how stressed I was. And women, I think, are under a lot of stress. So yeah, 80% of all people with autoimmune conditions are women. Why do autoimmune conditions love women so much? And why are women so stressed if stress is leading to autoimmune conditions? Like what is that connection there? personally, I think it might have to do something with women being conditioned to do everything flawlessly all the time, forever, forever and ever and ever, to be flawless and perfect. And we talked about this a little bit in the last episode when we were talking about fat phobia and diet culture, the way in which women are asked to be like so perfect and thin and show up in the world in that way. I mean, I think that that burden is put on women throughout a spectrum of instances, not just the way we look, but the way we are inside and out is expected to be like perfect. And I think that expectation to do it all like really contributes to burnout and illness. And that has been my personal experience. And I talked a little bit about that in the first episode at Stay at Home Feminist, when it was like, what is a stay at home feminist? And, you know, that is one of the reasons I left the workforce, because I was just really, really burnt out and really struggling. But I think another sort of aspect of stay-at-home feminists is like the encouragement to not have to be out on the streets to get what you want done, like not having to be perceived and out and about to make the difference you want to make. Like it really starts with within. And sometimes that is learning about autoimmune conditions so you can be a better, healthier version of yourself and show up for yourself and your loved ones and your community and society, you know? But I think that burnout and illness is such an integral part of America's specific brand of capitalism and the patriarchy. I think that the societal pressures and gender roles and general expectation to do it all and not complain like really does contribute to that like we have on our shoulders. And that's definitely not doing wonders for our immune system. So it is important to manage your stress and to, again, realize your stress is valid, even if you're not doing like the most stressful thing in the world, like your stress is valid, and take it down a notch, you know, just I am a high strung person. I am. So some of the ways that I try to chill out with my stress is like when I feel myself getting stressed, just like breathing, doing some deep breaths. That's really helpful. And another helpful tip I want to share is something I learned when I was diagnosed with my autoimmune condition is like, when you have an autoimmune condition or when you're trying to avoid getting an autoimmune condition, which I think we all should be, two like main variable here is you're trying to limit your toxic intake, like your toxic burden, and you're trying to get as much toxins out of you as possible. So some ways to limit your toxic burden is being careful with like the things you buy, like trying not to drink out of plastic water bottles, trying to have deodorant that doesn't have aluminum in it, and like stuff you put on your body, like skincare or lotions, shampoo, laundry detergent, things like that, like making sure that it's like good quality products. If you're going to take anything away from this podcast, other than the notes app when you go into the doctor's office, because that is really helpful, this is probably like the other most important thing I learned. So if you're going to take anything away from this, please have it be this, which is get an air filter and a water filter. Air filter, water filter. There are a lot of like that Jolie brand. I'm sure you've seen it. I haven't used it, so I can't speak to that, but that looks great. You just like replace the shower head and it has a built-in filter. There's also one that I used to use where I like unscrew the water head and I put the filter here in between like the spout and the water head was like the filter. And that was helpful. And I just bought my first home. So now that I'm somewhere permanent, I got like a whole house water filter. So there's like different levels to it. You can just do your shower if you don't want to get your whole house, or you're renting. Like when I was renting, I didn't want to like get a whole house filter because that's like a whole system. And like I wasn't going to be there forever. I just did under my kitchen sink and my shower head. And so those are the two most important. And then getting an air filter is really important too. So that really will decrease like the toxic burden. The air filter, water filter, and be careful of what you're putting on your body really does decrease your toxic burden of what you're intaking. And then ways to relieve yourself of toxins is make sure you're pooping. If you are not pooping, at least one really good poop a day. I mean, talk to your doctor. I'm not a fucking doctor, but if you were my girl and we were just kikiing, I would encourage you to take digestive enzymes and probiotics. I use seed probiotics and I really love that. And so yeah, make sure you're pooping, make sure you're sweating. Like daily movement is so important in America. Like we don't walk places often. Maybe if you live in like New York or Boston, but like or Chicago, but like other than those cities, like you are not walking, like you are getting in your car. And so I feel like it is really easy not to move and not to sweat. You want to sweat. Sweating gets rid of those toxins for you. I've had my sauna eras. I mean, I'm not been really good at going to my sauna lately, but sauna is really good for you. There's like some crazy stat, like if you go to the sauna like 4 times a week or something for 20 minutes each time, you're chance of a cardiovascular event, like a heart attack or a stroke or something like that, goes down like around 50%. So saunas are crazy good for you. So yeah, those are my little tips about autoimmune stuff and how to avoid it. If you suspect you have an autoimmune condition and you haven't been feeling well, that might help. Another more extreme version, which I don't think most Americans are ready for, is going gluten and dairy free. So gluten and dairy actually are known to, like, if you have an autoimmune condition, make it worse. It depends on the condition, and obviously it's not for everybody. But yeah, there's also the autoimmune diet or autoimmune protocol, AIP, which is a pretty extreme diet. It's like basically an elimination diet where you like cut out of certain types of foods and then you slowly start introducing them to see if they are having any negative effect on you. So yeah, those are some ways that you can take care of yourself and, you know, push back a little bit from this narrative in your life and within healthcare and take some control and ownership and, you know, not be a victim to this shit ass system. And as you know, I am an advocate for the soft girl era. And this is part of my origin story of how I went from like hustle culture girl boss to like really getting into my soft girl era, because I feel like putting down that mental load and taking a nap or just learning to say no, those things really, really can save your life. Like those lifestyle changes, which really, really can have that profound impact on you. So yeah, that's a little bit on my chapter with autoimmune conditions. I could talk about this all day. So if you have any questions, like please ask away, because we could circle back and do a whole other episode about healthcare stuff. I just also like, have you ever been like in a setting where you are hanging out with someone who has like an illness and an autoimmune condition, and then that's like all they talk about, and you're like, bitch, shut up. Like we're at brunch or like we're at a bachelorette party and I just met you. Like, why are you talking about why you're gluten-free? Like, I get it. I've been gluten-free before, but like, don't let that be the only thing you talk about. I think I feel that way a little bit. So don't want to talk about that too much unless you want me to, and then we can. Speaking about things I talk about way too much, it is ADHD women in healthcare. And, you know, let's just go for the neurodiverse spectrum and talk about the neglect of autistic and ADHD women, because I feel like women with ADHD and autism are not diagnosed frequently enough. They're either undiagnosed or misdiagnosed way too often. And neurodiverse women are often overlooked so much in our healthcare system because this is a healthcare system that is laser focused on the male experience, specifically white male norms. And if you don't fit the mold, then like, well, good fucking luck. I think this is specifically true with, if you look at autism and ADHD, those are things where they like really, really diagnose you via the studies done on boys and men. Young boys with autism, sort of the trope is that they will have a super special interest, and that special interest is something like trains. And we've seen that girls and women are a lot better at masking, or that their hyperfocus will be something that like women and girls are supposed to be doing, like social things or pop culture or stuff like that. So it doesn't get noticed as much. And I think that's true for autistic girls and women as much as it is with ADHD or ADD girls and women, especially if you are like high functioning with those things, which, okay, I guess I get that. But when you're undiagnosed, everything from your mental health to your day-to-day life becomes harder. It's like running a marathon with no shoes, except no one believes you're running. Is that the right way to explain it? I think it is really hard. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was a teenager, so not super late in life, but not early. And I think as I got into adulthood, I had to sort of do a lot of mental health work around like the ways in which not being diagnosed like fucked me up, because I thought I was fucking stupid and I had really low confidence. And I'm pretty sure I'm also dyslexic, undiagnosed dyslexic as well. So like spelling and reading and stuff was like really hard. And so that really, really stunted my confidence, especially when it came to being like my smartness and stuff. And with my personal thing, I like tried to put my emphasis on my looks or my physical abilities. Like I was sort of like your typical dumb jock. Like I did a lot of sports because I was really insecure about being dumb. And I wasn't dumb. I'm not dumb. I'm really fucking smart. I ended up getting my master's in law. I think I like had a chip on my shoulder and like wanted to go get like a really intense master's degree. I got my master's degree in public international law, and I was like the president of my class, and like I like went fucking off on it. But again, like all coming from this wound of like never feeling good enough because I felt fucking stupid. And I wasn't stupid. I am just neurodiverse and special. I think also with, I'll speak about ADHD. There were a lot of things like rejection sensitivity, being overstimulated. Like once I learned about what being overstimulated was, I was like, wow, so much of my life makes sense. I'm not a fucking bitch. I'm just overstimulated and like need a break. And like, that's okay. And like, again, speaking of stress, like I was so stressed most of my life because I was just fucking overstimulated and I didn't even know. So I think, again, like knowledge is power, especially with like healthcare and these things. And yeah, it's a shame women are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed because you feel fucking crazy when you don't have a diagnosis. So yeah, I'm ready to fucking advocate for the recognition of neurodiverse women in healthcare. It's been time to change that conversation. And I honestly love TikTok so much because of that, because I feel like TikTok, there are autistic women and there are ADHD women being like, look, I'm autistic. And this is probably not what you thought what an autistic woman looked like. And that's why they're not diagnosed, or like, hey, I'm ADHD. And like, I wasn't diagnosed, or I was misdiagnosed with X, Y, and Z. And like hearing these stories are really, really helpful. So yeah, I'm curious, listeners, if we have any neurodiverse people listening, what do you think a more inclusive healthcare system would look like for neurodiverse women? I'm very curious. It is easy just to like point and be like, why are all these things happening? And be like the patriarchy, which is like true. But if we want to get into the nitty gritty a little bit here, it's like, why is there this lack of research on women's health? Why does it still feel like medical research treats women's bodies as an afterthought? Medical research is mostly based on men. And why? One of the reasons is that women's hormones make us too complicated because we aren't just like, boom, testosterone and we have progesterone and estrogen. The medical community did not feel like dealing with all those hormones. So do a lot of medical testing on men because of that. Even when it comes to things like hormonal women conditions, and the impact of this research has left a gap on women's health from everything from drug diagnoses to women conditions like PCOS or endometriosis. So it's like a no fucking wonder women can't get proper treatment when they don't even know how to treat fucking women. Yeah, I think it's about time that we start advocating for more inclusive research, not just with women. There's so many more ways to be inclusive, and that we just push for more inclusive research and better representation of women in clinical trials. Like, it's 2020 fucking time to go. I would be remiss to talk about the medical industry and women and not talk about maternal mortality rates, specifically as it relates to racial disparities. Black women in the United States are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy complications than white women. Why is this still happening? Like, that is crazy to me. And what's even more unfortunate is how this is not information that everyone knows and has. When I first learned about this, I was like, huh? What? Why? Why the fuck is this still happening? Like, that's crazy to me. And basically what I learned is that implicit bias in healthcare, especially towards Black women, plays a huge role in these horrifying stats. So basically everything I've talked about in this podcast about women's voices being discredited and women not being listened to, it's times 3 to 4 when it comes to Black women. And again, this troubling stat highlights the need to really understand how to advocate for yourself and others during pregnancy, but also just during medical situations, and why it's even more crucial to women of color and to center voices of Black women in this conversation. So as a white woman, I don't want to over talk because I am not the type of person that's affected by this, but I did want to highlight this because it is a horrifying stat. And as I've said, I don't want any part of feminism if it isn't intersectional. We're not doing fucking trad wife, white woman only feminism around here. Maternal mortality rate is out of control in the US. And as I mentioned, maternal and infant mortality rate go up 6% in states with abortion bans. I think one of the most frustrating things about the abortion bans that I'm seeing is that I've tried to get pregnant before. And it wasn't until I was like actively trying to get pregnant and paying attention, like, am I pregnant? Am I pregnant? That I realized that there's something called the 2-week window, but it could be anywhere from like 2 to 3 weeks. And this is assuming you get regular periods, like you have a 28-day to 30 whatever is considered regular. I don't know. I'm not a fucking doctor, but whatever. This is assuming that you have regular periods which not everyone has. I spent most of my life with regular periods, and that is not super rare. But let's say you get regular periods, there's something called a 2-week window. And again, it can be longer than 2 weeks where you don't know whether you're pregnant or not. Basically, between ovulation and menstruation, you're just fucking chilling and you don't know if you're fucking pregnant. Which, first of all, if men got pregnant, are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? They would literally be able to look in the mirror and blink twice and know whether they were pregnant or not right away. Like the fact that there is that blind spot of the 2-week wait is insane to me. When like, it's so frustrating. And if you've ever tried to get pregnant before, you fucking know. But as I was trying to get pregnant and like dealing with this weight, I was like, okay, it's fine because if I'm not pregnant, cool. I'll go have a fucking espresso martini in 2 weeks. And then if I am pregnant, great, because that's what I want to happen. And I was just like, holy shit. These abortion bans really, really don't care or take into consideration or are written by men who know nothing about women, or honestly, even maybe women who know nothing about women, because I was a woman who didn't know this until I was actively trying to get pregnant. Like, you're not going to know you're fucking pregnant in the time of a lot of these bans. And the crazy thing is that if you take a pregnancy test in the 2-week window, even though like you could get a false negative is what I'm trying to say. And so these bans are just so stupid because pregnancy doesn't fucking work like that. Like, why do abortion bans act like women should know they're pregnant the minute it happens? Like, biology and science do not work like that. That is just, it's not how it works. And as I said, these bans are fucking stupid because they're putting women's health and lives at risk. Pro-life is a lie. You do not care if women die. Okay? Period. I think it's so frustrating when people dismiss these bans as not a big deal. First of all, people are like, what rights do you think you're losing? And I'm like, they're like, it went down to states' rights and now the states get a vote on it. Okay, the last time there was a conversation this big about state rights, it was having to do with slavery. So maybe things should not be left up to the states because that didn't go so well before. Second of all, yeah, the fact that it's not federally protected and I'm like, my rights differ from state to state are the rights I lost. So silence, fucking go educate yourself. But second of all, when people are like, these bans are not that big of a deal, I'm like, you are so annoying. Okay, so Roe v. Wade was about privacy. And it basically essentially was like, this should be a choice between a woman and her doctor and her fucking God or whatever the fuck. And now that privacy is not respected. And it's like another way in which women are degraded. So I just moved to a state and the election cycle just happened. And I was like, and I am someone who wants to get pregnant in the near future. And the fact that I even have to tell you this fucking story is the fucking point of privacy not being respected. And yeah, I could just shut the fuck up and not say it, but like women are going to die because of these bans. I was worried that I might be one of those women. Because of my autoimmune condition, Hashimoto's, you are more likely to miscarriage if you are someone with Hashimoto's. Also, even if you don't have Hashimoto's, like 25% of pregnancies or 20% of pregnancies end up in a miscarriage. So, and you know what the treatment for miscarriage is? Abortion. It's a DNC or it's the abortion pills. My state that I live in was voting on whether abortion would be protected in the state's constitution. And I was like, holy shit, if that doesn't go through and we have a federal abortion ban, like, am I going to feel comfortable getting pregnant here? Because even though the goal for me isn't to get an abortion, like the goal for me is to get pregnant and carry a baby to term and deliver a happy, healthy baby. And I want multiple children. I want to do this like multiple times. But because I know there's a risk, like how am I supposed to comfortably get pregnant knowing that I have a higher chance of miscarriage and knowing that if I have a miscarriage, I might not be able to get that medical care in my state. I might have to flee the state or the fucking country to get medical care. Like, do you know how fucked that is? Do you know how fucking insane that is? So it really fucking grinds my motherfucking gears when people are like, these bans aren't that important. These bans aren't that big of a deal. It's just better to protect unborn babies. And it's like, I'm fucking sorry. I get that you want the fetuses to become fucking humans. Sure. I don't agree with that. Again, pro-choice. If you don't want to have a fucking abortion, don't have a fucking abortion. Your body, your fucking choice, babe. Do you? No one is making you have fucking abortions, and no one is having late-term abortions. No one is having post-birth abortions while we're on that. Well, thank fuck that the abortion protection passed in the state that I live in. But the fact that I might be more likely to die due to pregnancy complications, depending on my zip code, is insane. And that is the right that we lost, that people with ovaries fucking lost under the Supreme Court that Trump on purpose put in there. And I think it's so frustrating when people act like a right wasn't lost, or like it's not a big deal, or like it's not going to have a negative impact. And we talked about maternal mortality rates impacting women of color and Black women specifically more than any other demographic. And 2 out of the 3 women who have died from abortion ban related complications have been Black women. And like, that is what pro-abortion activists, pro-choice activists have been warning us about. And that time is here and it's happening. So to just sit there with your head up your ass and act like it's not fucking happening is delusional. And again, it is not pro-life, because this is harmful. Abortion is much more nuanced. And for the people who think that like women or people with ovaries are seriously using abortion as birth control, you don't understand what birth control is. Birth control is preventing you from getting pregnant. So no, that's not real. And post-birth abortions aren't real. Let's just get some medical facts straight for a moment here. What timeline are we in? Like, how is this a real conversation that I'm having right now? God damn it. Anyways, back to the point that I was making. With the nuance of abortion bans, I think there is an unrealistic expectation surrounding pregnancy detection that, I mean, when I had heard of these really strict bans, I was like, damn, that's like crazy. No one's going to know they're pregnant by then. But now as someone who has tried to get pregnant, I am like, oh, I wouldn't have known I was pregnant by then. And like, I wanted to get pregnant, but if I didn't, like, fuck. So again, people who haven't tried to get pregnant maybe don't have such a strong opinion about this, I guess, is my fucking point. People who don't have ovaries maybe don't have such a strong opinion. You don't have to have an opinion about everything, okay? You don't have to. Abortion bans put women's health and autonomy at risk. And I like both of those things. I like to be healthy and I like bodily autonomy. So that's just how the fuck I feel. And if you don't feel that way, you clearly don't care. You clearly don't care. It is medically hard to detect pregnancy early. And the fact that the law chooses to ignore this reality is a great metaphor for the ways in which these laws choose to ignore the medical facts about abortion. And the consequences of these unreal expectations are that women are going to be put in harm's way because of these bans. And women are already dying because of these bans. So that's not a dramatic thing to say. That is fact. We know that abortion bans don't stop abortion. They just stop safe and legal abortion. Is what it is. That just is what it is. I had someone in my comment section be like, oh yeah, well then the same thing should apply for guns. And it's like, no, what? Excuse me, what? I can't even dive into this right now with having my fucking cunt explode. We have assault rifles on the streets, shooting up kindergartens and places of worship and grocery stores, and literally name a spot. Name a spot, it's probably been shot up in America. Guns are the #1 killer of teens and children. Guns do not save lives in that kind of way. They don't. They don't. They don't. Look at other countries and look at how they don't. I can't get into this. Just shut up. That's a stupid point and you're an idiot. We can sort of start to wrap things up. And basically, all in all, this healthcare system was built by white men. The healthcare system was designed by white men for white men. And women have really just been figuring it out as we go along. The system was built on bias that persists today as it relates to race and gender, which affects how women, especially women of color, receive care. From drug testing to diagnosis, the system has been tailored around men. So if you don't trust the healthcare system, maybe you have a good reason to. I think this male-centric system is just one of the ways that the patriarchy really affects women's quality of life and health today. And I think we need to push for change. And stay-at-home feminists, it's like, start from within and let that expand. It starts with understanding that this is an issue, finding out ways to protect yourself, both things that you can do in the home and in the doctor's office, and continuing to question and advocate for yourself and for others. And if you're listening to this episode and you're like, damn, this woman is really angry. Like, yeah, I am. I'm an angry bitch. We knew that. And if you're like, wow, this is like a lot of information and like, she just seems like a hater and like, there's no way this can all be true. Look at the protections men have around Viagra and the lack of protections women have around women's health care. Like erectile dysfunction is prioritized astronomically more then endometriosis, then PCOS, then miscarriages, then miscarriage treatment, which is abortion, then so many other things. How would the world look if women's health were prioritized with the same urgency as erectile dysfunction? Like, literally, babes. But it's not. So that leads me into the empowering segment of today's episode, Feminist Health Hacks. Welcome to Feminist Health Hacks, where I arm you with the tools you need to navigate the healthcare system as best as possible, at least, especially since this healthcare system was not designed with you in mind. We talked about bringing a list of questions to the doctor's office, but another hack is bringing a list of symptoms. Again, it can be very overwhelming when you're put on the spot and have to talk about everything and you forget this and that. Write every random symptom you feel down. Maybe they're related, maybe they're not. Present them all. Every day, if you're dealing with a health issue, take a note of it. Take a note of it and just see so you can refer back to. Again, in this world, you kind of have to be meticulous when it comes to advocating for yourself, and it can be exhausting, but it's well worth it. Number 2, this might seem kind of obvious, but research your provider. Look for a specialist who's focused on women's health or naturopathy if that's your thing, or figure out what's right for you. And unfortunately, it does take trial and error. And unfortunately, trial and error means error. Error is a part of that, and that sucks. But really figure out what kind of doctor suits you. And don't hesitate to switch if it's not working. You can leave. You can go. Hack number 3, don't be afraid to speak up and advocate for yourself. I know that's what this whole segment is about, is different ways of advocating for yourself and the preparation it takes to advocate for yourself. But I think the hardest one to get through, especially because so many women are conditioned to not disturb the status quo and to peacekeep and to be people pleasers. And it's a lot harder than it sounds advocating for yourself. It's a lot harder than it sounds saying when a doctor tells you something and you're like, no, that's not good enough. I need more help. But if you came here for permission, this is me giving you that permission. And I hope you give it to yourself, because that's what really matters. So that's a little bit of what I've learned throughout my healthcare journey. The more I know, the more I'll share. In the meantime, do you have any healthcare hacks? Share it with us on social media. Put it in the comments. Write it on this video so we can all take notes and help and uplift each other, because part of being your own advocate is forming community and forming that care. So yeah. Well, thanks for joining. And on that note, let's for real wrap it up this time. No pun intended with the birth control topics of today. Today, we took a deep dive into how the patriarchy has completely infiltrated the healthcare system, which maybe is a little terrifying at first if you haven't thought too much about this concept, but let yourself panic for a moment and then step into your empowerment, because the more that you know this, the more that you can do what is best for you and yourself, and get those air filters and water filters. If an air filter company wants to sponsor me, let me know, because I am so passionate about air filters and water filters. At me, babes, come for me. And in that, we talked about everything from why women's pain is dismissed so often, and also why autoimmune conditions love us so much. Look into the research on that, because honestly, I have a personal belief that people pleasing is the root of autoimmune conditions, because you are just not checking in with yourself and overperforming and stressing your nervous system out. I'm not a doctor though, so take that with a grain of salt. That's just my woo-woo. That's just my vibes. That's just what I think. Those are just my thoughts. And we also dove right into maternal health care, and that abortion is healthcare, essentially. Healthcare in the patriarchy without discussing the ways in which abortion is essential healthcare. I have so much more I can talk about on abortion, so let me know if that's something that's interesting to you, because it is to me. I will definitely do more episodes if you guys are picking up what I'm putting down. So yeah, I guess the point of today's episode is to reflect on your own healthcare experiences and start advocating for yourself more fiercely. Get after it. It's time to question the system and demand better care. And most of all, don't settle for less. And also, don't just take what a doctor says at face value. Dig deeper, ask questions, and find providers who take you seriously. Anyways, thanks again for listening. I hope that you think about what you're going to do differently at your next doctor's appointment. ask those extra questions, maybe switch providers, whatever it is, trust that you deserve to be heard and respected. I am so excited that you listened today. If you liked today's episode, please drop a comment, subscribe, like, do all the things. We're a new show and I really want to know how it's impacting everyone. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time, where we talk about what to do once we've smashed the patriarchy. And spoiler alert, it is the matriarchy. So we're going to dive into what is the matriarchy? What's that bad bitch all about? And how can we implement it in our lives and into the world? All right. Thanks for joining. Mwah.